Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Mind. Tonight, we are moving towards something that lives at the very center of what it means to be a human being awake inside a life. Not at the edges, not in the extraordinary moments, but in the middle of the most ordinary ones. In the reaching for a second cup of something warm. In the way attention drifts toward a window, toward a memory, toward a version of tomorrow that hasn't arrived yet. In the quiet pull that sits underneath so many of the day's movements, patient and persistent, rarely named. Desire is one of the oldest subjects in the history of human thought, and one of the most misunderstood. It is not simply want. It is not appetite or preference or the pleasant anticipation of something good. It is something older and more fundamental than any of those words suggest. It is the forward lean of consciousness itself, the shape the mind makes when it reaches. The great contemplative traditions have spent millennia looking at it closely. What they found was not what most people expect. Not a problem to be solved, not a wound to be healed, but a texture of experience so central, so interwoven with the fabric of ordinary living, that simply learning to see it clearly turned out to change everything. Desire is what drives the suffering the Buddha described in his very first teaching, and yet it is also, in its transformed and widened form, what draws a practitioner toward liberation. It is the source of the greatest restlessness the human mind produces, and the very energy redirected that makes genuine compassion possible. It is what keeps the wheel of ordinary life turning, and, seen all the way through, what allows the wheel to come gently to rest. Right now, as you settle in for the night, you may notice it in small ways. A lingering thought, a wish that something had gone differently, a quiet pull toward sleep, toward rest, toward the release the body has been asking for since long before you lay down. If you find something worth staying with in these slow, unhurried evenings, I would love for you to like this video or subscribe to The Sleepy Mind. It helps more tired and curious people find their way here, one gentle night at a time. But for now, let everything else recede. Let your shoulders settle. Let your hands find a natural resting place and release what they've been holding. Allow your jaw to soften, your breath to arrive without effort, and the day, with all its forward momentum, to finally, slowly, begin to still. We are going somewhere quiet tonight, somewhere that has been looking at the most human of all movements, the reaching, the wanting, the thirst for more, with extraordinary patience and without judgment. Somewhere that holds out the possibility that in understanding this one thing, this single thread woven through every moment of a life, a person might, at last, rest. Let's begin. Before anything else can be understood about desire, it helps to begin with the word. Not the English word, which carries its own centuries of accumulated meaning, but the older word. The one the Buddha used when he turned to his first students and told them, as plainly as he could, what he believed was happening inside the human mind. The Pali word is tanha. It means thirst. This is not a metaphor chosen casually. It is a precise description of a very precise experience. Thirst is not a gentle preference. It is not the mild inclination of a person who would, if given the option, choose one thing over another. Thirst is the body's signal that something essential has been depleted and must be replenished. It has an urgency to it, a forwardness, a quality of incompleteness that does not soften on its own. that does not allow the mind to simply rest until something is done about it. The Buddha chose this word, and he chose it deliberately because he wanted to describe not merely what desire feels like in its obvious moments, but the texture of unexamined experience in general. The low, persistent, barely noticed pull toward more, toward better, towards something other than exactly what is present. The Sanskrit tradition uses the equivalent word trishna, carrying the same root meaning, the same drive forward-reaching, the same signal that the self has registered a gap between what it has and what it wants, and that this gap feels like something that must be closed. This word, tanha, appears thousands of times across the Pali canon, the vast body of scripture preserved in the Theravada tradition. It is not a peripheral concept. It is not one item on a longer list. It is treated, in the oldest recorded teachings of Buddhism, as a fundamental feature of what it means to be an unexamined human being, moving through a world of impermanent things. Not an occasional difficulty, not a weakness of character, a structure, a consistent pattern in the architecture of ordinary experience. There is a second Pali word that also translates in English as desire. That word is shanda, and here the tradition makes a distinction that turns out to matter enormously. While tanha is the thirst that grasps and clings and ultimately disappoints, shanda is the wholesome wish, the aspiration towards skillful action, the motivation of a practitioner who genuinely wants to understand, to be of use, to cultivate qualities of mind that reduce suffering. Shanda is considered a positive quality in Theravada teaching. It is, in fact, considered a necessary condition for the path. The existence of these two words side by side suggests something the whole tradition is quietly saying. That desire is not a single thing. That the question is never simply whether wanting is present, but what kind of wanting it is, and what it is pointed toward. Tanha and chanda use different energies. One moves toward objects it believes will complete the self. The other moves toward understanding, toward practice, toward the welfare of others. The tradition does not ask a practitioner to stop wanting. It asks them to look carefully at the particular quality of the wanting that is actually present. In Sanskrit, the word kama names a more specific territory still. It refers to sensory and sexual desire in particular, and it appears in classical Hindu philosophy as one of the four legitimate aims of human life, alongside dharma, which means right conduct and moral duty, artha, meaning prosperity and material well-being, and moksha, the liberation from the cycle of rebirth. The inclusion of karma among these four aims is not incidental. It reflects a tradition that understood sensory pleasure as a genuine and real aspect of human experience, worthy of acknowledgement, neither to be dismissed as trivial, nor to be elevated as ultimate. The English word desire has its own quiet etymological story. It comes from the Latin desiderare, which may be rooted in the phrase decidere, meaning from the stars. To desire something, in this oldest sense, is to long for it the way one longs for what is distant and luminous and not yet in hand. There is beauty in this etymology, and something honest in it as well. The stars are real, their light is real, but they are always, by definition, elsewhere. The distance is built into the reaching. In Chinese Buddhist texts, the intricate territory of craving is mapped with two principal characters. The first, Ai, carries the sense of love attachment. a feeling that has warmth in it alongside its grip. The second, tan, means something closer to greed desire, a reaching that is less warm and more consuming. The interplay between these two qualities, the warm and the consuming, was explored in great detail across the Chinese commentarial traditions, which were acutely interested in the ways love and craving could become entangled, and the ways they could, with care, be distinguished. In Japanese Zen literature, the character Yoku names desire or appetite, and it appears frequently in discussions of the 5 hindrances to meditation. The 5 hindrances are states that cloud the mind and impede the settling of attention. Sensory desire is always listed first among them, not because it is the worst, but because it is the most immediate, the most recognizable, and in many practitioners, the one that requires the most sustained and patient attention. All of these words, from their different languages and their different traditions, are pointing toward the same lived territory: the reaching, the thirst, the forward lean of a mind that has found something pleasant and wants more of it, or found something unpleasant and wants to be free of it, or simply feels an incompleteness that it is trying in various ways to resolve. It is a territory most people enter dozens of times before breakfast without ever quite stopping to name it. And it is precisely because the territory is so familiar, so constant, so ordinary, that the tradition asks us to look at it closely, to bring to it the same quality of attention we might bring to something rare and strange. Because what is found, when that attention is genuinely applied, turns out to be among the most consequential discoveries a human mind can make. The words themselves are only the beginning. What they point toward is something more ancient and more immediate than any word in any language can fully hold. It is something that was already present long before the first teacher gave it a name. And it is something the Buddha placed, without hesitation, at the very center of his first and most essential teaching. The story of the Four Noble Truths begins not with a doctrine, but with a problem. A problem so immediate, so woven into the fabric of ordinary experience, that it had been there all along, unexamined and unnamed, simply accepted as the ordinary texture of being alive. The problem, as the Buddha named it, is dukkha. The Pali word is usually translated as suffering, but the translation does not quite capture the full range of what the word means. Dukkha includes the obvious forms of suffering, pain, grief, loss, the unwanted arrivals, and the unavoidable endings. But it also includes something subtler, the persistent low-grade friction of impermanence, the way even the most pleasant experiences carry within them the seed of their own ending, the quiet dissatisfaction that surfaces in the still moments, even when life by any external measure is going well. Dukkha, in its deepest sense, is what it feels like to be reaching for permanent satisfaction in a world where nothing remains the same long enough to provide it. This is the first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, and it is not a pessimistic statement, it is a diagnostic one. The tradition is not saying that life is only suffering, or that happiness is illusory, or that nothing good exists. It is saying that a particular quality of unease runs through unexamined experience, and that this unease is worth looking at honestly before anything else can be understood. The second noble truth is samudaya, the truth of the arising of suffering. And here the teaching identifies, with the precision of someone who has looked at the question from the inside, What generates and sustains dukkha? The answer is tanha, craving, thirst, the mechanism by which suffering perpetuates itself. The Buddha was careful to describe 3 specific forms of tanha when he taught the second noble truth. The first is kama-tanha, craving for sensory pleasure. The second is bhava-tanha, craving for existence. The third is vibhava-tanha, craving for non-existence. Each of these will be explored more fully in the section that follows, but it is worth pausing here at the level of structure. The teaching does not say that craving sometimes produces suffering. It says that craving is the origin, the generating cause, of the unsatisfactoriness that characterizes ordinary life. This is a strong claim. It is also, for anyone who has sat quietly with their own experience long enough, a recognizable one. The third noble truth is nirodha, the cessation of suffering. It points toward a state in which craving has been fully relinquished. This state is called nibbana in Pali, or nirvana in Sanskrit. It does not describe the elimination of experience, or the extinction of awareness, or the disappearance of the person. It describes a quality of freedom. The freedom that is found when the endless loop of grasping and disappointment and renewed grasping has been thoroughly understood and, through that understanding, released. And the fourth noble truth is magga, the path, the eightfold path. The practical method by which craving is progressively loosened and ultimately let go. The path does not ask for a sudden act of will. It does not ask the practitioner to stop wanting through sheer determination. It asks for the cultivation of wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental training as mutually supporting conditions in which the understanding of tanha can deepen naturally over time until it is finally and completely known. One of the most important features of how the Buddha described tanha is what he did not say about it. He did not say it was evil. He did not say it was sinful. He did not frame it as a moral failing or a character weakness. He described it as a natural but ultimately unsatisfying response to a world of impermanent things. The craving is understandable. Given the structure of the senses and the way experience unfolds, it is almost inevitable. What makes it the origin of suffering is not that it is wrong, but that it is based on a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding that impermanent things can provide permanent satisfaction. The misunderstanding that the self that is doing the craving is a fixed, stable entity that can, in principle, be finally completed. In the Theravada understanding, tanha does not merely cause individual episodes of unhappiness. It is described as the engine that drives the entire cycle of rebirth, known as samsara, the Sanskrit word for the wandering or flowing on. The image is of a wheel in motion, kept turning by the friction of craving and aversion, life after life, until the friction is understood and the wheel can come gradually, gently to rest. The Buddha compared craving to fire. This comparison appears in one of the most celebrated early discourses, the Adita Pariyaya Sutta, known in English as the Fire Sermon. He delivered it to a group of former fire-worshipping ascetics, which meant his chosen image carried a particular resonance for that particular audience. Fire consumes what it feeds on and immediately seeks new fuel. It cannot be satisfied. It can only be sustained or extinguished. The moment it has finished with one thing, it reaches for the next. This is precisely the quality of tanha as the Buddha understood it, not a passing mood, not an occasional indulgence, a consuming process that perpetuates itself by the very act of being fed. In the fire sermon, the Buddha extended this metaphor further than might be expected. It is not only desire, he taught, that is burning. The senses themselves, their objects, and the consciousness that arises from the contact between them are all burning, with passion, with aversion, with delusion. The fire is everywhere in ordinary experience, not because experience itself is bad, but because ordinary experience is shot through with the habitual grasping that reaches toward what is pleasant and away from what is unpleasant, without ever quite stopping to look at the reaching itself. The liberation from craving described in the Third Noble Truth is, crucially, not presented as an act of suppression. It is not the result of forcing desire underground through willpower, or of denying the reality of pleasant experience, or of cultivating a kind of grey indifference toward the world. It is described as the natural result of clearly seeing the nature of impermanent things. When the impermanent is seen fully for what it is, the craving that was rooted in the belief in permanence loses its conceptual foundation. It is not pushed away, it is understood. And in that understanding, it gradually, quietly, softens and releases. This is the structure of the teaching: a problem identified with honesty, a cause described with precision, a cessation pointed toward with genuine confidence, and a path offered with the patient detail of someone who has walked it all the way and returned to describe what was found. There is something in this structure that is, in its own way, deeply restful. Not because it promises that everything will be easy, but because it suggests that what is happening inside the human mind is not a mystery. It is something that has been looked at clearly and carefully by people who loved what they found enough to spend their entire lives understanding it. In the stillness of a room, late in the evening, it is possible to notice the quality of one's own mind, not as a dramatic observation, but as a quiet one. The way attention drifts towards something, the way a particular thought surfaces and lingers, the way the body leans, almost imperceptibly, in the direction of some small comfort or anticipated pleasure. These are the movements of kama-tanha, craving for sensory pleasure. The most immediately recognizable of the three forms of craving the Buddha named in the Second Noble Truth, and the one that greets most practitioners first when they begin to look honestly at their own experience. Kama-tanha includes desire for agreeable sights, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and mental objects. Any pleasant sense contact, any moment when the world delivers something the body registers as good, carries within it the seed of this form of craving. The Theravada Abhidhamma, the tradition's systematic analysis of mind and matter, describes its arising in careful detail. When a pleasant sense contact occurs and the experience is felt as agreeable, the mind reaches toward it with wanting, not always loudly, not always urgently, sometimes as a murmur, a barely perceptible inclination toward more. The Theravada teachers often point to kama-tanha as the form of craving most accessible to beginning practitioners, precisely because of its close tie to physical sensation. The body is a generous provider of evidence. The pleasure of warmth, of food, of rest, of pleasant sound, and the wanting that immediately follows each of these is not hard to observe if the attention is turned in the right direction. It is, in a sense, always available for inspection. The challenge is simply to notice it rather than immediately follow it. The second form is bhavatanha, craving for existence. This one is subtler, and it takes longer to recognize. It includes the wish to continue existing, the attachment to one's identity and its continuation, and the desire for a current pleasant state to persist indefinitely. It is the quality of experience that arises when things are going well, and the mind quietly, insistently whispers, "Let this last. Do not let this change. Let me remain here, in this form, in this condition, indefinitely." Theravada commentators describe bhavatanha as the craving that underlies the formation of a new life at the moment of death in the cosmological understanding of rebirth. It is the momentum of identity, the forward lean of a self that has become accustomed to its own existence and cannot quite release the grip on continuing. But one does not need to hold traditional cosmological views to recognize the ordinary texture of this form of craving. It is present in the wish that good health will continue, in the reluctance to acknowledge that a phase of life is ending, in the small, persistent resistance to the knowledge that everything, including the self that is doing the wishing, is impermanent. Bhavatanha is sometimes described, in the language of ordinary psychology, as the desire to be seen, to matter, to leave a mark. The wish that one's existence has permanent significance, that what one has done and been will outlast the life in which it was done and been. This is not described as a shameful desire. It is a very human one. But it is, in the framework of the teaching, another form of reaching for permanence in a world that does not offer it. The third form is vibhavatanha, craving for non-existence. This is, in some ways, the most counterintuitive of the three, because it is not immediately obvious how annihilation could be a form of craving. But the Buddha was precise about it, and the precision rewards attention. Vibhavatanha is not simply the wish to die. It is the desire to escape painful situations through their complete elimination. The wish that a particular suffering would simply cease to exist. The nihilistic worldview that locates peace in nothingness, in the belief that the end of existence would also be the end of difficulty. It includes the destructive impulse, the turning of aversion into something absolute, the desire not merely for relief, but for obliteration. Understanding vibhavatanha helps to clarify something important about how the teaching understands liberation. Nibbana, the cessation of suffering, is not annihilation. It is not the end of experience or the elimination of consciousness. It is described in the Pali texts as precisely the opposite of vibhavatanha. Where vibhavatanha seeks to escape through non-existence, the liberation the tradition points toward is a genuine understanding of the nature of experience that makes escape unnecessary. The difficulty does not need to be annihilated. It needs to be seen clearly, and in that seeing, its power to generate suffering softens. These three cravings share a common architecture. They each arise in response to felt experience. They each carry a quality of urgency and incompleteness. They each are self-perpetuating, which is to say that the act of following them does not resolve them, but only creates the conditions for their next arising. The sensory pleasure obtained through kama-tanha produces, after its peak, the familiar flatness of having arrived, and in that flatness, tanha rises again toward the next object. The existence secured through bhavatanha requires continuous maintenance and defense. The escape sought through vibhava tanha tends, if examined honestly, to generate its own further forms of distress. In Theravada meditation instructions, practitioners are encouraged to do something that seems, at first, almost too simple. Not to suppress craving when it arises, not to act on it, simply to observe it, to notice its texture in the body and the mind, to watch it arise, intensify, and, if left unacted upon, begin to soften and pass. This observation, done with genuine attention and genuine patience, is itself described as transformative, not because the watching changes the craving through force, but because the watching reveals what the craving actually is, not a permanent feature of experience, not a voice with ultimate authority, a conditioned arising, a wave, something that began and will, like everything else, end. Theravada teachers describe a window of awareness in the moment just before craving fully solidifies. That moment of raw feeling tone, of the body registering pleasant or unpleasant before the story about it has fully formed. If the practitioner can be present at that threshold, something becomes possible that is not possible once the craving has gathered momentum. Not resistance, not suppression, but a clear seeing of what is actually happening before the habitual response has had a chance to arise. This window is always open. It is simply very narrow, and it requires a quality of attention that most people have never quite learned to sustain. Sustaining it gently, patiently, over years, turns out to be one of the most significant things a person can do with their inner life. The senses are where desire begins, not in some abstract region of the mind, not in philosophical speculation about what is real, but in the moment when the eye meets the seen, when the ear meets the heard, when the tongue meets the tasted, and something pleasant or unpleasant registers in the body. It begins in contact. In the Pali word phassa, which names exactly that, the moment of meeting between a sense organ and its object. Buddhist psychology describes 6 sense bases rather than 5. 5 correspond to the physical senses familiar from any anatomy class. The 6th is the mind itself, treated as a sense organ whose objects are thoughts, memories, imaginings, and mental states. Just as the eye takes in visual forms, the mind takes in mental objects. And just as pleasant visual forms can trigger the arising of tanha, so can pleasant thoughts, pleasant anticipations, pleasant memories. The mind reaches toward what it finds agreeable in exactly the same way the hand reaches towards something warm. When sense contact occurs and the experience registers as pleasant, a quality the Pali language calls vedana, feeling tone, records it as agreeable. And it is here, at this threshold, that the chain toward craving typically begins. Agreeable feeling tone, wanting, reaching. The sequence is not mysterious, but it is fast, and it tends to happen beneath the threshold of ordinary awareness. Most people do not experience the sequence as a sequence. They simply find that they want something without quite knowing when the wanting began. This chain is described in detail in the Paticca Samuppada, the Pali teaching on dependent origination. One of the most analytically refined frameworks in the entire history of Buddhist thought, dependent origination maps 12 links in a chain of conditioned arising. Craving, tanha, appears as the 8th link in this chain, arising from feeling, vedana, which arises from contact, phassa, which arises from the meeting of the sense base and its object. This is not a description of something occasional. It is a description of the ordinary moment-to-moment process by which experience unfolds in an unexamined mind. What dependent origination suggests, and this is perhaps its most practically significant implication, is that desire is not a fixed character trait. It is not something one either has or does not have, a permanent feature of personality that can only be accepted or fought. It is a conditioned response, a link in a chain that had earlier links and will have later ones. And like any chain, it can be interrupted. The chain does not have to be broken by force at the point of craving itself, which is often the most difficult place to intervene. It can be interrupted earlier, at feeling tone, by bringing careful attention to the quality of experience before the wanting has fully formed. It can be interrupted earlier still, at contact, by the practice the Theravada tradition calls Indriya Samvara, the restraint of the sense faculties. Indriya Samvara is sometimes misunderstood as a form of sensory deprivation, as if the goal were to prevent experience from arriving altogether. But that is not how the texts describe it. The practice is not about closing the eyes and ears and refusing contact with the world. It is about bringing a quality of attention to sense contact that prevents the immediate automatic leap to craving. The sense faculty is present. The object is present. The contact happens. What Indriya Samvara cultivates is the capacity to meet that contact with awareness, rather than with the habitual forward lunge of wanting. Theravada monastic rules governing the use of the senses, what monks look at, listen to, eat, wear, and engage with, are understood within this framework as supportive conditions rather than moralistic prohibitions. They are arrangements designed to reduce the volume of sense-triggered wanting by simplifying the environment in which the senses operate, not because the world is dangerous, but because the practitioner who is early in training benefits from an environment that does not constantly stimulate the very tendencies they are trying to understand. The rules are scaffolding, not architecture. The architecture is awareness. The Buddha taught something about this that is precise and worth holding carefully. The problem is not the sense organs themselves. The eye is not the problem, nor is the visible form it takes in, nor is the pleasure that arises when a beautiful thing is seen. These are natural phenomena arising from natural conditions, carrying their own genuine qualities. The problem, if problem is the right word, is the habitual reaching that arises in the moment after pleasant contact has occurred. The reaching for permanence in something that is already, even as it is being enjoyed, beginning its return to impermanence. The I is not the problem. The reaching is. This distinction is important because it clarifies what the practice is actually for. It is not for the elimination of pleasant experience. It is not for the cultivation of a grey, affectless neutrality toward the world. It is for the development of a quality of awareness stable enough to be genuinely present with pleasant experience, without immediately converting that presence into grasping. To taste something good, and to taste it fully, without the reaching for more that tends to arrive before the first taste is even finished. To see something beautiful, and to see it clearly, without the anxiety of wanting to hold on to it that tends to cloud the seeing the moment the beauty is registered. Some teachers in the Theravada tradition describe the moment just before craving solidifies as a window. A narrow window, but a real one. if awareness can be present at the level of feeling tone, at the moment of registration before the habitual wanting has gathered its momentum, a different response becomes possible. Not a dramatic intervention, not a forced suppression, simply a clear seeing of what is actually happening. And in that seeing, the chain of conditioning, for that moment, that one particular moment, has somewhere other to go than where it usually goes. This window, it is said, is always open. It requires only the willingness to look. There is a moment in the life of a desire when it changes in character. When the wanting, which was already present and already reaching, deepens and grips. When the object becomes not merely desired, but felt as necessary. When the possibility of not having it shifts from inconvenience to something more closely resembling threat. This intensification is what the Theravada tradition names upadana. The Pali word means clinging or attachment, and the teaching describes it as what tanha becomes when it is allowed to strengthen undisturbed. The relationship between craving and clinging is sequential, but also continuous. Craving reaches, clinging holds. Where craving moves toward an object with wanting, clinging wraps around it with a grip that resists any movement away. The distinction is worth feeling into because it describes something that most people have experienced directly. There is a difference between wanting a particular outcome and having become so attached to it that the absence of that outcome feels, in some way, like the absence of oneself. Theravada teaching describes 4 specific forms of clinging. The first is clinging to sensory pleasures, kama upadana, the intensified form of kama tanha. This is the most familiar and the most immediately visible. It includes the habits of consumption, the patterns of seeking particular experiences again and again, the difficulty of being comfortable in the absence of what the senses have learned to expect. The second form is clinging to views and opinions, ditthi upadana. This one tends to surprise people because it is not immediately obvious that holding a view could be a form of attachment. But the tradition is precise about it. Ditthi upadana is not simply having opinions. It is the identification with one's opinions as defining features of oneself. The feeling that to have a particular view challenged is to be personally threatened. The inability to hold a position lightly, to examine it with genuine openness, to release it if something more accurate is found. Clinging to views includes clinging not just to factual beliefs, but to one's identity as someone who holds particular kinds of positions. The person who cannot afford to be wrong, because being wrong would mean being something less than what they have understood themselves to be. The third form is silabata upadana, clinging to rules and practices. The Buddha described this as the mistaken belief that performing certain rituals or following specific external forms will, by themselves, produce liberation. This does not mean that rules and practices are worthless. The Eightfold Path is itself a set of practices, and the Theravada tradition holds monastic discipline in the highest regard. What is being pointed at is something subtler, the tendency to confuse the map with the territory, to become attached to the form of practice rather than to what the practice is meant to cultivate, to follow the letter of an instruction while remaining asleep to its spirit. The fourth form is perhaps the deepest and most pervasive. Atta upadana, clinging to the belief in a permanent self. In Theravada teaching, this is understood as the root from which all other forms of clinging grow, because it is precisely the belief in a fixed, permanent, independent self that makes craving seem necessary. If there is a self that can be completed, then kamatanha makes sense as an attempt to complete it. If there is a self whose existence matters permanently, then bhavatanha makes sense as an attempt to secure it. If there is a self that is suffering, then vibhavatanha makes sense as an attempt to escape on its behalf. The belief in a permanent self is not merely a philosophical error. It is the structural condition that makes ordinary craving feel not only natural but urgent. In Theravada Abhidhamma, the mental factor of lobha describes what greed and grasping look like at the level of direct experience. It is understood as one of three unwholesome roots, alongside dosa, which means aversion or ill will, and moha, which means delusion or the clouding of clear perception. These three are understood in the tradition as the fundamental conditions out of which suffering arises. They are not sins in a moralistic sense. They are, again, conditioned responses, habitual patterns in the movement of mind that can be understood and, through understanding, released. Mahayana Buddhist thought approaches attachment from a slightly different angle without contradicting the Theravada analysis. In the Mahayana understanding, attachment is not only a personal psychological condition, it is rooted in the fundamental misperception of phenomena as having inherent independent existence, a philosophical property that Sanskrit calls svabhava. The belief that things exist in and of themselves, independently of causes and conditions, independently of the mind that perceives them, is the conceptual foundation on which all craving is built. If things truly existed in the solid, fixed, independent way we habitually take them to be, then clinging to them would make sense. What Mahayana philosophy argues is that they do not, that all phenomena are empty of that kind of inherent existence, that the solidity the mind projects onto its objects is a construction, and that clearly seeing this construction is itself a form of liberation. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition adds its own vocabulary to this territory. The word Shenpa, which a simple dictionary might render as attachment, points towards something more phenomenologically specific. It names the felt sense of being hooked by an experience. The moment the mind snags on something, it wants to keep or push away. The Tibetan teacher Pema Chodron has described Shenpa as the urge underneath the urge, the raw preconceptual quality of being pulled before the story about the pulling has even formed, before the mind has had a chance to explain, to justify, to construct the narrative of why this particular wanting is reasonable. Shenpa is what is happening right at that threshold. And what is being suggested is that it is possible to feel it, to stay with it, without immediately following it to its habitual conclusions. In the Zen tradition, the relationship to desire is addressed with a directness that bypasses doctrinal elaboration. Classical Zen encounters with desire do not ask students to analyze the structure of craving or to trace its origins through 12 links of conditioned arising. They ask instead a more immediate question. Not what is desire, but who is desiring. The investigation turns not toward the object of wanting, but toward the one who is doing the wanting. And in that turning, something about the structure of the self that the wanting was serving tends to become visible in a way that analysis alone cannot quite achieve. Clinging, in all its forms, is understood across the traditions not as the end of a story, but as a middle, as something that arose from conditions and can, through the right conditions, be gradually released. The hand that grips does not grip forever. Given time, given understanding, given the particular quality of attention that practice cultivates, the grip tends to soften. Not because something has been suppressed, but because something has been seen. There is a finding from modern neuroscience that has been cited again and again in conversations between contemplative practitioners and researchers. It concerns a distinction that turns out to be surprisingly precise. The distinction between wanting and liking. These feel, in ordinary experience, like they belong together. Wanting something and liking it seem like two aspects of the same movement. But the neuroscientist Kent Berridge and his colleagues, working through careful experimental research, found that wanting and liking are supported by different neurological systems. The wanting system drives the pursuit of an object. It is associated with dopaminergic pathways, networks of brain structures and chemical messengers that encode anticipation, motivation, and reward-seeking behavior. The liking system processes the actual pleasure of receiving the desired object. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that has attracted so much attention from people interested in the meeting point of neuroscience and contemplative practice, is that these two systems can become completely decoupled. It is neurologically possible to intensely want something that, when it finally arrives, produces very little pleasure at all. The wanting was vivid, urgent, and consuming. The having is flat. This is not a rare experience. Most people who have followed a significant desire to its completion have encountered something like it. The object obtained, the achievement reached, the experience finally had, and then a particular quiet in the aftermath that is not quite satisfaction. This finding has been compared in the scientific literature that has explored its implications to the Buddhist description of tanha as inherently unsatisfying. Not because the objects of desire are illusory, but because the wanting and the having were never, even neurologically, the same process. The anticipation of a reward activates the dopaminergic system more strongly than the reward itself. The brain is, in a measurable sense, more engaged by the possibility of getting than by the fact of having. This asymmetry explains a great deal about the texture of ordinary desire, the excitement of the chase, the peculiar deflation that sometimes follows arrival. The way the mind is already scanning for the next object before the previous one has been fully tasted. This asymmetry has been given a name in psychological literature: the hedonic treadmill, the tendency for pleasure to return to a baseline regardless of what is acquired. The person who imagines that obtaining a particular thing will make them lastingly happy tends to find, once the thing is obtained, that happiness settles back to approximately where it was before. This is not a counsel of despair. It is a description of a mechanism. And recognizing the mechanism, which is what the contemplative traditions have been asking practitioners to do for thousands of years, is the beginning of a different relationship to wanting. The Pali concept of papanka deserves particular attention in this context. The word is sometimes translated as mental proliferation or conceptual elaboration, and what it names is one of the most recognizable features of the ordinary wandering mind. Papanka is the tendency of the mind to take a single desired object and spin it into an elaborate scenario, to construct, in imagination, a future in which having the thing resolves some deeper incompleteness. The object itself may be modest, a conversation imagined to go perfectly, a recognition hoped for, a circumstance wished to be different. But the mind does not stop with the object. It builds a whole surrounding story, a world in which the desired thing exists, and in which everything that depends on it is also better. Papanka is desire's narrative, the story the mind tells itself about why getting what it wants will finally make things complete. This is not a description of fantasy or delusion in the clinical sense. It is a description of something extremely ordinary. The mind that lies awake planning tomorrow, constructing versions of conversations not yet had, rehearsing the obtaining of things not yet obtained, is engaged in papanka. The practitioner who works with papanka does not try to stop the storytelling through force. They learn to recognize the story as a story, to see its familiar structure, and in that recognition, to step back from it slightly, the way a person steps back from a painting to see the whole rather than only the detail they were standing inside. Mindfulness-based research has examined what happens in the brain when experienced meditators encounter craving states. The findings consistently suggest that sustained attentional practice changes the brain's relationship to wanting, not by eliminating the arising of desire states, but by altering how they are processed. Meditators tend to show differences in the regions associated with the identification of a state as requiring immediate action. The wanting arises, but the compelling quality of the wanting, the sense that it must be followed, seems to soften with practice. Buddhist-informed psychology, particularly the approaches that have developed from mindfulness research in clinical contexts, uses a specific phrase for what tends to go wrong in the ordinary relationship to desire. It is called fusion. The identification with the wanting state as if it were the entirety of the self. To be fused with a desire is to experience it not as something the mind is having, but as something the mind is. To have the wanting feel so continuous with one's own identity that not following it feels like self-betrayal. The cultivation of the ability to notice the wanting without becoming it, to observe the reaching without being fully captured by the reaching, is understood in these frameworks as both psychologically and neurologically meaningful. As a genuine shift in the relationship between the observing awareness and the content it observes. The Pali Canon describes someone who has deeply understood the nature of desire in terms that have always struck those who encounter them as remarkably precise. Such a practitioner still experiences preferences and inclinations. They are not robots of equanimity, faces blank, and sensations flattened. They still taste food, still find certain company more pleasant than others, still notice the qualities of a beautiful morning. What has changed is the quality of the relationship to those preferences. The compulsive forward lunge that characterizes ordinary craving, the helpless quality of being driven toward an object rather than moving toward it with some degree of choice, has been replaced by something that is genuinely different. A presence that can hold an experience fully, including its pleasurable qualities, without being taken hostage by it. Of all the teachings in the Buddhist tradition, the one that most directly addresses the structure of desire is not the one that names desire explicitly. It is the one that simply observes that things change, that nothing holds its form forever, that every experience that arises is already, in the very moment of its arising, beginning its return to impermanence. The Pali word is anicca, impermanence. It is one of three characteristics of existence that the Theravada tradition identifies as universal. The other two are dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness that arises from impermanence, and anatta, the absence of a fixed, independent self. These three are understood not as philosophical positions to be debated, but as features of experience that can be directly observed by anyone willing to look carefully enough. Anicca and tanha are intimately related. The connection between them is not incidental, but structural. Craving arises most powerfully in relation to impermanent things, precisely because impermanent things cannot deliver what craving is asking of them. The sensation of pleasure is impermanent. The state of well-being is impermanent. The relationship, the success, the condition of the body, the quality of the morning, all of it is impermanent. And tanha is the forward lean of a mind that has found something pleasant among these impermanent things and is asking it to stay permanently. The asking and the answering are structurally mismatched. The question the craving is posing cannot be answered by the kind of thing being asked. The Theravada teaching on anicca is not primarily philosophical, it is experiential. Practitioners in vipassana meditation, a Pali word meaning insight, are instructed not to think about impermanence, but to observe it directly in the arising and passing of sensations, thoughts, and mental states. The instruction is to sit with the body and notice that nothing in experience holds still. Sensations arise, peak, and pass. Thoughts begin and end. Emotions swell and subside. Even the sense of a continuous self watching all of this turns out, under careful observation, to be a rapid succession of moments of awareness rather than a single continuous stream. The impermanent nature of experience becomes known not as a concept, but as something felt in the body, something tasted directly, something that the practitioner comes to recognize the way a sailor comes to recognize the movement of water. The Ratapala Sutta of the Pali Canon contains a passage that has stayed with students of the teaching for centuries. A former prince who became a monk offers 4 condensed summaries of the teaching, and among them is this observation: the world is insufficient. It is without satisfaction, a slave to craving. What he is pointing at is the gap between what the world actually provides and what desire persistently asks of it. Not that the world is empty or without beauty, but that it cannot give what craving is asking for, because what craving is asking for is the impossible thing of permanence. The Tibetan text, known in the West as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Thodol, approaches this question from the unusual angle of what happens at the end of a life. It describes the intermediate state, the bardo, between death and rebirth, as significantly shaped by the habitual desires and aversions accumulated during life. The teachings contained in the text aim to prepare practitioners to remain aware amid the powerful pulls of these accumulated tendencies, rather than being swept along by them automatically. The suggestion is that the habits of desire formed during a life have momentum that extends beyond the life itself, and that the practice of working with those habits during life is, in this framework, of the most profound significance. The philosopher Nagarjuna, writing in the 2nd century of the Common Era, offered what is perhaps the most philosophically rigorous account of the relationship between desire and impermanence in the entire Buddhist tradition. In his Mulamadhyamaka Karika, the fundamental verses on the middle way, he argued that desire is rooted in the false perception of objects as having fixed, independent, inherent existence. The mind takes an object, attributes to it a solidity and independence that it does not actually have, and then reaches toward it with the wanting of tanha, as if that solid, fixed object could be obtained and held. When the empty nature of phenomena is clearly understood, Nagarjuna argued, craving loses its conceptual foundation. The reaching towards something fixed cannot survive the recognition that the fixedness was always a construction. This analysis connects the Mahayana philosophical tradition's understanding of emptiness to the lived experience of desire in a way that is practically significant. Emptiness, in Nagarjuna's usage, does not mean nothingness. It means the absence of inherent, independent existence. Things arise from conditions. They are defined by their relationships. They are processes rather than fixed entities. And once this is seen, not only thought, but genuinely seen, the reaching toward them as if they were fixed and seizable begins to feel not merely futile, but somehow beside the point. The Zen phrase, mono no aware, which comes from Japanese aesthetics rather than formal doctrinal teaching, names a quality of experience that sits in an interesting relationship to desire. It describes a gentle, bittersweet awareness of impermanence, the feeling that arises when beauty is perceived alongside the knowledge that it will pass, the particular poignancy of a cherry blossom seen in full bloom precisely because it will not last. Mono no aware is distinct from craving. It does not reach. It does not grasp. It simply holds the beautiful and the impermanent together, without trying to resolve the tension between them, without insisting that either the beauty or the impermanence be otherwise. It is, in its own way, a description of what it looks like to be fully present with something without demanding that it be different. The Theravada practice of contemplating the impermanence of the body, its aging, its vulnerability to illness, its inevitable dissolution, is prescribed not as an exercise in morbidity, but as a specific method for loosening the grip of bodily craving. What tends to happen in practitioners who engage seriously with this contemplation is not despondency, but a particular quality of appreciation. The body, seen clearly as the impermanent and remarkable thing it is, becomes something to be present with, rather than something to manage and improve and maintain indefinitely. The morning is noticed differently when the practitioner holds in mind that there is a finite number of mornings available. The Thai forest teacher Ajahn Chah offered an image that has been shared so widely because it captures something important with unusual economy. He held up a glass, a simple drinking glass, and said that he already considered it broken. Not in the sense of treating it carelessly or lovingly less, but in the sense that he held its inevitable future in mind alongside its present reality. Knowing the glass would eventually break, he said, allowed him to enjoy it fully now without clinging. When it broke, it would be simply the completion of what was always already going to happen. And in the meantime, the glass was just a glass, seen clearly and fully for exactly what it was. This is the quality of attention that the teaching on impermanence is pointing toward. not a rehearsal for loss, not a cultivation of detachment in the sense of emotional withdrawal, but a presence that holds the real alongside the impermanent, without demanding that the impermanent be otherwise, and without the grief of reaching for what cannot stay. The story of how the middle way came to be taught is, in a sense, a story about desire and its opposite, because the person who eventually articulated it had spent years living at both extremes and had felt, in his own body and mind, what each extreme actually produced. Before his awakening, the man who would become the Buddha lived as a prince in circumstances of material abundance. Karma, sensory pleasure, was available in its most refined and elaborate forms. Beautiful environments, music, food, the company of people chosen for their pleasantness. Every desire met and met again. And what this period of his life produced, by his own account, was not satisfaction, but a particular kind of restlessness. The restlessness of a person who has been given everything the senses can provide, and finds that it does not quite answer the question the senses keep raising. He left that life and became an ascetic, and here the pendulum swung completely to the other side. For years, he practiced a form of self-mortification of remarkable severity, extreme fasting, exposure to physical discomfort, the systematic denial of the body's requirements in the belief that the release of spiritual liberation could be achieved through the subjugation of physical need. He found practitioners who shared this orientation and surpassed them all in the extremity of his practice. What he found at this extreme was also not what he was looking for. Not liberation. A body so weakened that the depth of concentration required for genuine insight was impossible to sustain. A mind exhausted and clouded rather than clear and available. And then, one day, the moment of recognition that the path of extreme asceticism could not lead where he was trying to go. The recognition came with an act of simple nourishment. A woman named Sujata offered him a bowl of rice milk. He accepted it. And in that acceptance was the beginning of the middle way. Not a compromise between two positions, not a calculation of optimal moderate consumption, but a recognition, born from direct experience of both extremes, that the path to genuine freedom was neither the gratification of every desire, nor the violent suppression of them all. The middle way avoids two extremes, and the tradition is precise about naming them. Kamasukha Likkhana Yoga is the first, the devotion to sensory pleasure, to the indulgence of every arising desire, and Atthakila Matha Anu Yoga is the second, the devotion to self-mortification, to the suppression and punishment of the body and its needs. Both extremes, in the Buddha's direct experience, are unproductive. Both lead away from the understanding they claim to be moving toward. What the middle way is, affirmatively, is described in the Eightfold Path. 8 interlocking elements of training in wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental development. The path does not address desire by directly targeting it. It creates conditions in which desire can be understood. Wisdom begins to see the nature of impermanent things. Ethical conduct creates a quality of harmlessness that prevents the acting on desire from generating the additional entanglement that unskillful action produces. Meditative training develops the stability of attention needed to observe desire clearly rather than simply following it. Nekkhamma, the Pali word for renunciation, is one of the 10 paramitas, or perfections, cultivated across the path in Theravada teaching. Its meaning is often misunderstood as giving things up in a spirit of deprivation. but the texts describe something different. Renunciation, as it is actually experienced in practice, tends to feel like expansion rather than contraction. What is found when the grip of craving on a particular object is genuinely released is not the empty absence of the thing, but a quality of spaciousness in the mind that was previously occupied by the reaching. The practitioners who describe this experience consistently say something similar. Not that the relinquishing was pleasant in the moment of its happening, but that what was found afterward was unexpectedly rich. In Mahayana Buddhism, the teaching on the Bodhisattva adds a dimension to the question of desire that is not present in the earlier Theravada framework. The Bodhisattva is a practitioner who vows to remain present in the cycle of existence until all beings are liberated from suffering. This is not a vow made reluctantly. It is made from compassion, from the recognition that the liberation of any individual practitioner is incomplete while others remain in the grip of tanha. And it involves, crucially, a form of desire. Not tanha, not the self-centered grasping that perpetuates suffering, but bodhicitta, the awakening mind, the genuine wish that all beings be free. Bodhicitta is understood in both its relative and its ultimate forms. Relative bodhicitta is the aspiration to attain awakening for the benefit of all beings. Ultimate bodhicitta is the direct recognition of the empty nature of all phenomena, and the relationship between these two is understood as mutually supporting. The compassionate wish for all beings motivates practice. The recognition of emptiness liberates practice from the grasping that would otherwise undermine it. In Tibetan Buddhism, the energy of ordinary desire is understood, in the Vajrayana teaching, as not simply to be abandoned, but to be transformed. Each of the 5 poisons, including desire, is said to contain within it a corresponding wisdom. The poison of desire, when seen clearly and worked with skillfully, is the seed of discriminating awareness wisdom, a clarity of perception that sees each phenomenon as distinct and precisely itself, rather than as a blur in which all things run together. The implication is significant. The energy that is flowing when desire is present is not itself the problem. It is a resource. What transforms it is not suppression, but recognition. The 3rd stage of awakening in Theravada teaching, the stage called anagami or non-returner, is described as the point at which sensory desire no longer arises. Not merely that it arises and is not followed, but that the pull itself has been sufficiently understood that it no longer has traction. The practitioner who reaches this stage is not described as cold or unfeeling. They are described as genuinely free from the compulsive quality of kama tanha, while remaining warmly present to the world and those within it. This is understood not as the end of the path, but as a particular milestone within it. What remains beyond it is subtler and harder to describe, but the direction is the same: toward understanding, toward release, toward the gradual, patient, ordinary freedom that the teaching has always been pointing at. Zen does not approach desire by way of analysis. It is not a tradition that tends to offer long, taxonomic descriptions of the forms of craving and their structural properties. What Zen offers, characteristically, is something more immediate: an encounter, a confrontation with the very thing being investigated, arranged in such a way that the investigation cannot remain merely intellectual. In Zen, the relationship to desire tends to be addressed through practice itself rather than through doctrine. The primary instructions in Zen point toward direct experience of the present moment. The practitioner sits, they breathe, they notice what arises and what passes. They return to the simplicity of what is actually present, again and again, without the overlay of narrative about what should be present or what might be preferred. This returning is, in itself, a continuous and gentle practice with desire. Because what the sitting practitioner discovers, almost immediately, is that the mind does not stay where it is placed. It moves. It reaches towards something remembered. It rehearses something anticipated. It constructs its stories and its preferences and its wishes without being asked. And the practice of sitting is, in large measure, the practice of noticing this movement without being fully captured by it, and returning gently to what is. The formal Zen vows, known as the 4 Bodhisattva vows, include a line that has been the subject of considerable reflection across the centuries. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The vow is made in full knowledge of what it is claiming. Desires are inexhaustible. The vow to end what is inexhaustible is, by any ordinary logic, a vow to do the impossible. And yet the vow is made, sincerely, repeatedly, communally. It is one of the most important elements of Zen practice. What this paradox is pointing at is not a failure of logic, but a different relationship to practice itself. The vow is not a contract with a termination date. It is a direction, a commitment to a particular orientation that is renewed again and again, not because the goal has been reached and must be maintained, but because the renewed commitment is itself the practice. The vow to put an end to what is inexhaustible is the vow to keep looking clearly at what is present, to keep returning to what is real, to keep releasing the grip of wanting on a moment-to-moment basis, without any expectation that the work will one day be finished. This is a different understanding of achievement than the one most people bring to a goal. In the Rinzai school of Zen, a Japanese lineage tracing its roots to the Tang dynasty Chinese master Linji Yixuan, something interesting is done with the energy of desire. Rather than being simply set aside, it is deliberately cultivated in a particular direction. The practice of working with koans, those compressed paradoxical questions or statements that cannot be resolved by ordinary rational thinking, involves the deliberate arousal of what is called great doubt. Great doubt is a state of intense, wholehearted questioning. It has something in it that resembles desire in its phenomenological quality. There is urgency, there is a forward lean, there is a sense of incompleteness that the mind cannot simply put down and forget about. But its object is not acquisition, it is understanding. The great doubt of Rinzai practice has been compared, by more than one teacher, to the state of a person whose hair is on fire and who must find water. The urgency is real. The need to resolve is genuine. But what is being sought is not a thing that can be owned or accumulated. It is a seeing, a direct recognition. And the desire-like quality of the great doubt is understood not as an obstacle to this recognition, but as its necessary fuel. The Soto school of Zen, the other major Japanese lineage, takes a different approach to the same territory. The practice of shikantaza, just sitting, does not aim to arouse a particular state. It aims rather at the complete absence of a goal object. The practitioner sits, not in order to attain something, not in order to arrive somewhere, simply to sit completely as the expression of what the practitioner already is. Dogen Zenji, the 13th century founder of the Japanese Soto school, described practice and enlightenment as inseparable. The sitting is not a means towards something else. It is already the thing itself. In this framework, desire is neither cultivated nor suppressed. The practitioner simply sits, and whatever arises in the sitting, including desire, is part of what is being sat with. The practice is to be fully present to all of it, without selection, without preference, without the attempt to create a particular state and sustain it. The wanting that arises in sitting is not the enemy of sitting. It is another object of awareness, arising and passing like all the others. Dogen Zenji wrote, in his masterwork, the Shobogenzo, something that has become one of the most frequently quoted passages in all of Zen literature. To study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by all things. This progression describes something that connects to desire in a way that becomes clearer when it is followed carefully. The self that is studied turns out to be the same self that is doing the craving. The forgetting of the self is the softening of the fixed boundary between the self that wants and the world it wants from. And what is found in that softening, in the being actualized by all things, is something that does not need to reach for more, because it is already in full contact with what is. Dogen also wrote about desire in the context of cooking. His Tenzo Kyokun, or Instructions for the Cook, describes the role of the head cook in a monastery with an attention to detail that is, on its surface, about food preparation. But Dogen makes it clear that what he is describing is a complete expression of practice. The cook who handles the most ordinary ingredients, the vegetables, the water, the fire, with complete attention and care, is practicing the release of preferential craving in action. Not because the vegetables are spiritually significant in themselves, but because the quality of attention brought to them is itself the practice. Nothing is treated as less important. Nothing is hurried through in anticipation of something better. Each ingredient is the entire practice. Shunryu Suzuki, the Japanese Zen teacher who founded the San Francisco Zen Center in the mid-20th century, and whose book Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, introduced many Western practitioners to Zen, described desire in terms of two kinds of mind. Small mind, he said, is the mind that is constantly wanting and comparing, measuring each experience against what was had before and what might be had next, calculating, preferring, reaching. Big mind, he said, is open and without a fixed preference, not in the sense of having no response to what arises, but in the sense of not having a predefined agenda about what should arrive. Small mind and big mind are not two different people. They are two qualities of the same mind, and sitting practice is one of the primary means by which the territory of big mind is gradually, gently expanded. Zen does not promise that desire will disappear. It does not offer a map to a place where wanting no longer arises. What it offers is something more subtle and more useful. A quality of presence that can hold desire, see it clearly, without being helplessly defined by it. A returning, again and again, to what is actually present, before the stories about what is wanted have had a chance to take over completely. A sitting, simply, in the middle of everything, including the wanting, and discovering that the middle of everything is, after all, large enough to hold it. Zen does not approach desire by way of analysis. It is not a tradition that tends to offer long taxonomic descriptions of the forms of craving and their structural properties. What Zen offers, characteristically, is something more immediate. An encounter, a confrontation with the very thing being investigated, arranged in such a way that the investigation cannot remain merely intellectual. In Zen, the relationship to desire tends to be addressed through practice itself, rather than through doctrine. The primary instructions in Zen point toward direct experience of the present moment. The practitioner sits, they breathe, they notice what arises and what passes. They return to the simplicity of what is actually present, again and again, without the overlay of narrative about what should be present or what might be preferred. This returning is, in itself, a continuous and gentle practice with desire. Because what the sitting practitioner discovers almost immediately is that the mind does not stay where it is placed. It moves. It reaches towards something remembered. It rehearses something anticipated. It constructs its stories and its preferences and its wishes without being asked. And the practice of sitting is, in large measure, the practice of noticing this movement without being fully captured by it, and returning gently to what is. The formal Zen vows, known as the 4 Bodhisattva vows, include a line that has been the subject of considerable reflection across the centuries. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The vow is made in full knowledge of what it is claiming. Desires are inexhaustible. The vow to end what is inexhaustible is, by any ordinary logic, a vow to do the impossible. And yet the vow is made sincerely, repeatedly, communally. It is one of the most important elements of Zen practice. What this paradox is pointing at is not a failure of logic, but a different relationship to practice itself. The vow is not a contract with a termination date. It is a direction, a commitment to a particular orientation that is renewed again and again, not because the goal has been reached and must be maintained, but because the renewed commitment is itself the practice. The vow to put an end to what is inexhaustible is the vow to keep looking clearly at what is present, to keep returning to what is real, to keep releasing the grip of wanting on a moment-to-moment basis, without any expectation that the work will one day be finished. This is a different understanding of achievement than the one most people bring to a goal. In the Rinzai school of Zen, a Japanese lineage tracing its roots to the Tang dynasty Chinese master Linji Yixuan, something interesting is done with the energy of desire. Rather than being simply set aside, it is deliberately cultivated in a particular direction. The practice of working with koans, those compressed paradoxical questions or statements that cannot be resolved by ordinary rational thinking, involves the deliberate arousal of what is called great doubt. Great doubt is a state of intense, wholehearted questioning. It has something in it that resembles desire in its phenomenological quality. There is urgency. There is a forward lean. There is a sense of incompleteness that the mind cannot simply put down and forget about. But its object is not acquisition. It is understanding. The great doubt of Rinzai practice has been compared, by more than one teacher, to the state of a person whose hair is on fire and who must find water. The urgency is real. The need to resolve is genuine. But what is being sought is not a thing that can be owned or accumulated. It is a seeing, a direct recognition, and the desire-like quality of the great doubt is understood not as an obstacle to this recognition, but as its necessary fuel. The Soto school of Zen, the other major Japanese lineage, takes a different approach to the same territory. The practice of shikantaza, just sitting, does not aim to arouse a particular state. It aims rather at the complete absence of a goal object. The practitioner sits, not in order to attain something, not in order to arrive somewhere, simply to sit completely as the expression of what the practitioner already is. Dogen Zenji, the 13th century founder of the Japanese Soto school, described practice and enlightenment as inseparable. The sitting is not a means towards something else. It is already the thing itself. In this framework, desire is neither cultivated nor suppressed. The practitioner simply sits, and whatever arises in the sitting, including desire, is part of what is being sat with. The practice is to be fully present to all of it, without selection, without preference, without the attempt to create a particular state and sustain it. The wanting that arises in sitting is not the enemy of sitting. It is another object of awareness, arising and passing like all the others. Dogen Zenji wrote in his masterwork The Shobogenzo something that has become one of the most frequently quoted passages in all of Zen literature. To study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by all things. This progression describes something that connects to desire in a way that becomes clearer when it is followed carefully. The self that is studied turns out to be the same self that is doing the craving. The forgetting of the self is the softening of the fixed boundary between the self that wants and the world it wants from. And what is found in that softening, in the being actualized by all things, is something that does not need to reach for more, because it is already in full contact with what is. Dogen also wrote about desire in the context of cooking. His Tenzo Kyokun, or Instructions for the Cook, describes the role of the head cook in a monastery with an attention to detail that is, on its surface, about food preparation. But Dogen makes it clear that what he is describing is a complete expression of practice. The cook who handles the most ordinary ingredients, the vegetables, the water, the fire, with complete attention and care, is practicing the release of preferential craving in action. Not because the vegetables are spiritually significant in themselves, but because the quality of attention brought to them is itself the practice. Nothing is treated as less important. Nothing is hurried through in anticipation of something better. Each ingredient is the entire practice. Shunryu Suzuki, the Japanese Zen teacher who founded the San Francisco Zen Center in the mid-20th century, and whose book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, introduced many Western practitioners to Zen, described desire in terms of two kinds of mind. Small mind, he said, is the mind that is constantly wanting and comparing, measuring each experience against what was had before and what might be had next, calculating, preferring, reaching. Big mind, he said, is open and without a fixed preference, not in the sense of having no response to what arises, but in the sense of not having a predefined agenda about what should arrive. Small mind and big mind are not two different people. They are two qualities of the same mind, and sitting practice is one of the primary means by which the territory of big mind is gradually gently expanded. Zen does not promise that desire will disappear. It does not offer a map to a place where wanting no longer arises. What it offers is something more subtle and more useful, a quality of presence that can hold desire, see it clearly, without being helplessly defined by it, a returning again and again to what is actually present before the stories about what is wanted have had a chance to take over completely, a sitting simply in the middle of everything, including the wanting, and discovering that the middle of everything is, after all, large enough to hold it. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition brings to the question of desire a set of tools and a conceptual vocabulary that are, in important ways, distinct from both the Theravada and Zen approaches. Where Theravada tends toward analytical precision and Zen tends toward direct encounter, Tibetan Buddhism, particularly in its Vajrayana dimension, tends toward transformation. The question it asks is not how desire can be relinquished or transcended, but how the energy that flows in desire can be recognized for what it ultimately is and redirected toward awakening rather than toward further entanglement. This approach rests on a teaching about the 5 poisons and their corresponding wisdoms. The 5 poisons are desire, aversion, delusion, pride, and envy. They are called poisons because, in their ordinary expression, they generate suffering for those who experience them and for those around them. But the Vajrayana teaching makes a claim about them that is not found in the same form in other Buddhist traditions. Each poison contains within it a corresponding wisdom. Not symbolically, but directly. The same energy that flows when desire is present is, when recognized and understood rather than acted on or suppressed, the energy of discriminating awareness wisdom. The clarity that perceives each phenomenon as distinct and precisely itself. That sees the particular nature of each thing rather than drowning it in a wash of undifferentiated wanting. This is a striking and important teaching. It means that the energy of desire is not simply a problem to be solved or an obstacle to be removed. It is a resource, a form of vitality that, when it is running in the groove of craving, generates suffering, but when it is running in the groove of clear awareness, becomes a quality of perception more precise and more alive than ordinary neutral perception tends to be. The concept of Shempa, which the teacher Pema Chodron has made accessible to Western practitioners through several decades of teaching, describes the phenomenological territory of this transformative work with unusual precision. Shempa is the charge, the hook, the felt quality of being caught in a moment of desire or aversion before the storyline about it has fully formed. It is what happens in the space between sense contact and the fully developed narrative about what is wanted or feared. A tightening, a pull, a sense of the mind snapping towards something. Most people, in most moments, are not aware of Shempa at the level at which it actually operates, because by the time they notice what is happening, the narrative has already formed, and they are inside it. The practice that Tibetan teachers point to in relation to Shempa is not the elimination of the charge, but the capacity to stay with it, to feel the tightening without immediately following it to its habitual destination. This staying requires a quality of attention that is developed through practice over time. It is genuinely uncomfortable at first. The charge has a compelling quality that the untrained mind finds almost impossible to simply hold without acting on. but the teachers consistently point to what is found when the holding is sustained. Not an intensification of the discomfort, but eventually a softening, a dissolution. The charge dissipates when it is not fed by either acting on it or suppressing it, and what remains after it passes is something the teachers describe as more spacious than what was present before. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, one of the most significant figures in the introduction of Tibetan Buddhism to the West, described a particular spiritual difficulty that he named spiritual materialism. It is a trap that deserves careful consideration because it is subtle and because it is especially relevant to anyone who has been involved in spiritual practice long enough to have developed a sense of progress. Spiritual materialism is what happens when the desire for enlightenment becomes itself a new and subtler form of craving. When the achievement of spiritual states becomes the new acquisition, when the collection of experiences and insights and recognitions becomes a new form of identity, when the very momentum of practice is driven by the same self-centered grasping that practice is supposed to be releasing. The teaching is a direct invitation to examine not only what one desires, but whether the desire for liberation has itself become the latest and most sophisticated form of tanha. The concept of rigpa, pure awareness, as it is understood in the Dzogchen teachings of the Tibetan tradition, offers perhaps the most complete account of what it looks like when the grip of desire has been understood all the way through. Rigpa is sometimes described as the ground of awareness prior to the arising of the grasping mind. Not a state achieved through effort, but a quality that is always already present, temporarily obscured by the clouds of craving, aversion, and delusion, but never itself affected by those clouds. The practice of recognizing Rigpa is, in this framework, not the acquisition of a new quality, but the recognition of what was there all along, underneath the movement of wanting. The Bhava Chakra, the Wheel of Life, is one of the most recognizable images in Tibetan Buddhist iconography. It appears on thankas, painted scroll images, displayed at the entrances of monasteries throughout the Tibetan cultural world. The wheel depicts the 6 realms of existence and the conditions that keep beings cycling through them. At its very center, the hub of the wheel, are 3 animals: a pig representing delusion, a snake representing aversion, and a bird representing desire. The 3 are shown biting each other's tails, each feeding on the next, each sustaining the turning of the wheel. The image is simple and clear in its teaching. Desire is not shown at the center of the wheel because it is the worst of the 3 qualities. It is shown there because it is one of 3 equally fundamental conditions that keep the wheel in motion. And the wheel, the tradition is saying, keeps turning precisely because these 3 qualities keep feeding each other. Because desire generates the conditions for delusion, and delusion generates the conditions for aversion, and aversion generates the conditions for desire endlessly until the cycle is understood clearly enough to be released. The Bardo Thodol teaches that the moment of death is, in many ways, the moment of most concentrated desire. The habitual wanting of a lifetime, no longer channeled into the familiar grooves of a particular body and its particular circumstances, meets the open space of the dying process with all of its accumulated momentum. The teachings are designed to help the practitioner meet that moment with awareness rather than with the automatic following of desire's pull. What happens there the tradition teaches, depends enormously on the quality of familiarity with desire that has been cultivated during the life just ending. And this is, perhaps, the most consequential argument the tradition makes for why the work with desire is not a luxury or a refinement, but a matter of the most fundamental importance. There is a teaching that runs through every tradition within Buddhism, across Theravada and Mahayana and Vajrayana, and it is not primarily about desire at all, though it turns out to be directly relevant to everything that has been considered so far. It is the teaching about what a human mind is capable of when the energy of wanting is not eliminated but turned outward, when the forward lean of craving is transformed, slowly and through sustained practice, into the wish that all beings be free from suffering. The Pali word is karuna, compassion. The Sanskrit word is the same. It names the wish for beings to be free from pain and difficulty, and in the Mahayana tradition, it is presented as a purified form of desire. Not tanha, the self-centered grasping that perpetuates suffering, but a wanting that has been opened and widened until its object is no longer the satisfaction of a particular self, but the welfare of all. The structure of wanting is still present. The forward lean is still there, but its direction has completely changed. Bodhicitta, the awakening mind, is the concept in Mahayana Buddhism that most fully describes this transformation. In its relative form, bodhicitta is the aspiration to attain complete awakening for the benefit of all beings. It is a desire in the straightforward sense of being a wanting, a wishing, a motivated forward orientation towards something. But its object is not personal acquisition. It is universal benefit. And the energy it carries is described in the texts as genuinely different in quality from the energy of ordinary craving. Where tanha has a quality of urgency and incompleteness, of the self trying to fill a gap, bodhicitta has a quality of expansiveness and generosity, something giving itself outward rather than pulling inward. The 8th century Indian philosopher Shantideva, whose Bodhicariyavatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, remains one of the most widely studied texts in Tibetan Buddhism and increasingly across the wider Buddhist world, described the transformation from self-centered craving to universal compassion as the central movement of the entire spiritual path. The movement he describes is not a single dramatic conversion, but a gradual, practice-supported shift in the orientation of the self. A slow turning outward, a progressive dissolution of the boundary between self and other that ordinary tanha insists upon, and compassionate motivation gradually softens. The mechanism he describes for this transformation is beautiful in its simplicity. Suffering is suffering regardless of whose it is. The person who is suffering is not diminished in the significance of their pain by the fact that they are not the self doing the observing. And the compassion that recognizes this equivalence, that genuinely opens to the reality of others' experience as equally real and equally important as one's own, is not merely a moral stance. It is a shift in the actual structure of attention. The mind that is genuinely attending to the suffering of others is, for that moment, released from the small circuit of its own wanting. And in that release, something becomes available that craving, by its very structure, tends to block. In the Theravada tradition, mudita, the Pali word for sympathetic joy or appreciative joy, is the mental quality of taking genuine pleasure in the happiness and good fortune of others. It is a form of desire in the sense that it involves a wishing, a wanting good things to continue for those who are experiencing them. And it is cultivated explicitly as an antidote to envy, which is perhaps the most uncomfortable of desire's relatives. Envy is the wanting of what another has, combined with a quality of resentment toward the one who has it. Mudita does not suppress this tendency through willpower. It replaces its conceptual foundation. When genuine joy in others' well-being is present, there is no ground from which envy can arise, because the boundary between what is mine and what is theirs has softened to the point where another's flourishing is simply more flourishing in the world, which is, straightforwardly, good. The four divine abodes, the Brahma Viharas in Pali, present together a complete picture of what an inner life looks like when the energy of desire has been transformed rather than suppressed. Metta, loving kindness, is the wish that beings be happy. Karuna, compassion, is the wish that beings be free from suffering. Mudita, sympathetic joy, is the wish that beings' happiness continue and increase. Upekkha, equanimity, is the quality of spacious, balanced awareness that holds all of this without being disturbed by the unpredictability of what actually happens. These four are not separate qualities applied at separate moments. They are a single orientation toward experience, seen from four complementary angles, and together they describe a relationship to wanting that has moved far beyond the cramped circuit of personal craving, without losing the warmth that made even ordinary desire recognizable as human. The Tibetan understanding of bodhicitta adds a further dimension. In the Vajrayana framework, the relative bodhicitta of aspiration and compassionate action is understood as supported and ultimately rooted in ultimate bodhicitta, which is the direct recognition of the empty nature of all phenomena. These two dimensions are not separate. The compassion that wishes all beings free from suffering is deepened and purified by the recognition that the self that suffers is not the fixed, independent entity that ordinary experience takes it to be. And the recognition of emptiness is warmed and directed by the compassionate aspiration that motivates practice for the sake of all. Each opens the other. Together, they point toward a quality of awareness that has fully included desire, worked with it honestly, transformed it gradually, and arrived at something that still has the forward orientation of wanting, but has lost the grasping quality that generated suffering. The tradition does not suggest that this transformation is quick or easy. It describes it as the work of a lifetime, perhaps more than one lifetime, in frameworks where such continuity is understood to be real. But it consistently points out that the direction is clear, that the movement is possible, and that each genuine act of compassion, each moment of genuine care for another being, is itself the practice and the fruit of the practice simultaneously, not a means towards something else, the thing itself already. There is something in this teaching about compassion and desire that closes a circle which the earlier parts of the tradition opened. The teaching began with tanha, the thirst, the forward lean of a mind reaching toward impermanent things and finding there a perpetual and unsatisfying incompleteness. And it ends, in this expanded understanding, with a forward lean that has not been eliminated, but has been thoroughly understood, and in that understanding, transformed. The reaching is still present, but now it is reaching towards something that does not disappoint, toward the genuine welfare of others, toward an understanding that is shared rather than hoarded, toward a liberation that, in the Mahayana vision, cannot be complete until it is complete for everyone. This is where the long teaching on desire ultimately arrives, not at the elimination of wanting, not at a grey and featureless equanimity in which nothing moves, but at the discovery that the wanting was always capable of more than it was doing with itself, that the energy at the heart of craving, when it is clearly seen and gently turned, is also the energy of the most profound care a human being can offer to the world it finds itself in. The bell sounds, somewhere in the distance. The light outside has been softening for some time now. The body has been holding all of this, word by word, breath by breath, and it is ready now to let it settle, to let the understanding that arrived as words tonight move slowly from the listening mind into the resting body, into the quiet that has been waiting, patient and unhurried, beneath everything that was said. As we come gently to the end of our time with this subject, let everything that was covered begin to settle, the way sediment settles through still water, slowly, without effort, finding its level without being told where to go. We began with a word, tanha, thirst, and we followed it a long way from there. We walked through the earliest formal teaching the Buddha ever gave, in a deer park in northern India, where craving was named, for the first time and with extraordinary precision, as the mechanism by which suffering perpetuates itself. We looked at the three forms that craving takes, from the most visible and ordinary to the subtlest and most difficult to see. We followed desire all the way into the body, into the moment of sense contact, into the brief and usually unnoticed window between feeling tone and grasping, where all the work of practice turns out to be quietly concentrated. We moved through the four forms of clinging, through the neuroscience of wanting and liking, through the teaching on impermanence and the broken glass held gently in Ajahn Chah's hands. We walked the middle way between the two extremes that a single human life once had to demonstrate before they could be named. We sat in Zen halls, where desire is neither suppressed nor indulged, but simply witnessed, in the quality of full, unelaborated presence. We stood in the center of the Tibetan wheel of life and looked at the three animals turning at its hub. And we ended somewhere unexpected, perhaps, not with the elimination of desire, but with its transformation, with the possibility that the same energy, which turned inward and grasping, produces suffering, turned outward with genuine care, becomes the very warmth the tradition calls compassion. This is what all of it was pointing at, not a life empty of wanting, a life in which the wanting has been seen so clearly and held with enough care and patience that it gradually opens into something that does not grasp, something that is content to receive what is here and to offer what is possible and to rest. There is nothing you need to hold from this evening. The mind will keep what it needs, as it always does. The rest can dissolve the way a breath dissolves at the end of its exhale, not lost, simply released into the larger air. If you have found something worth returning to in these slow, unhurried evenings together, you are warmly welcome to leave a like or subscribe or share a quiet thought in the comments. The sleepy mind exists because of people who find something worth staying with in these gentle journeys, one soft night at a time. And if sleep has not quite arrived yet, there is another door waiting for you on the screen. Another quiet world, ready whenever you are. But if your eyes are growing heavy, let them close. Let your shoulders release whatever the day left there. Let your jaw soften. Let your hands rest where they are, open, empty, holding nothing. The reaching is finished for tonight. There is nothing left to want and nothing left to set aside. Only the breath, slow and even and entirely your own, moving in and out with the particular patience of something that has never once needed to be reminded how. Sleep well and good night.